The beauty of our Constitution was that it was designed based on a theory of evolution. The Bible and the Quran, they reject evolution, but not just in a scientific sense. They reject evolution in a humanistic sense. No matter what new things we learn, new compassion, new ideas, new information, it doesn't matter because the Bible and Quran, they're on those stone tablets and they don't change. Blacks, women, gay people, sorry, your application was received 2,000 years too late. Too bad for you. That's how it works there. But Madison's genius was his humble view that what he knew in 1787 was not everything that there was to know, and that new information was welcome. It was an evolutionary document. You know, some of you may have read and understand the biblical book of Revelations. And if you do understand it, let me know, because I have no clue what it means. I have no idea. To me, a real book of Revelations is what Darwin wrote. That's a book of Revelation. What Einstein wrote, that is a revelation. These are profound new ways, revealing ways of looking at our world. Just as dramatically and just as importantly, Madison offered a new way of looking at human interactions, rules that bend toward justice. Einstein showed us that light bends, and Madison showed us that the light of justice bends toward ever-increasing inclusion and tolerance and compassion. And the light of justice is bending. It's bending in the right direction. You know, of people who are 65 and older, 7% of Americans 65 and older identify as atheist or some form of non-believing naturalistic worldview. Among people who are 30 and under, it's almost 4 times as many who express that naturalistic worldview. You know, the religious right, they've been lobbying for many years in Washington, D.C., and they've got millions and millions of dollars behind them. But the Secular Coalition for America, we may have only existed for about 4 years, but we have justice on our side, and we have the trends on our side, and all we need is you. We need your active leadership and involvement in these issues. You know, President Jimmy Carter says he's visited 125 nations since he left the White House. And he's found that wherever he goes in those nations, that the people, not any government, but that the people themselves have chosen John Lennon's song, Imagine, as something that's almost equal to a national anthem. They sing it spontaneously at events and places where former President Carter goes. And to me, there's a connection there. Madison, a lawyer, and John Lennon, a poet, both increasingly in their lives became focused on how human beings interact with each other to, as Aeschylus said, tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. That was their focus. Madison imagined a constitution that was an evolutionary mechanism toward ever-increasing justice. And Lennon's song, Imagine, is a constitution. It constitutes a vision of a better world. And each passing generation has increasing passion for that worldview. We are going to get there, but it takes greater effort. It takes greater effort on our part, of every single one of us in this room. In the scripture, it says, God instructed Abraham to kill his child. That's the legend. But what we need to remember is Amia White, that little 2-year-old girl, dying alone in that van. We need to remember Jessica Crank. We need to speak out for them. We cannot sit silently while a modern Abraham is authorized to kill their child. Not in this century, not with our laws, and not under this Constitution. The vicious McCarthy era was the era that foisted on us the phrase, one nation under God, when we have always really been one nation under the Constitution. It is up to us to rejuvenate and fulfill that vision. I am devoting my life to this cause. I'm going to give the rest of my life to this cause, and I'm asking everyone in this room to become actively involved in changing America, actively involved in American atheists, actively involved in speaking to your leaders in Washington and in your state capital to say we are going to make a positive change for the great secular American heritage for the one nation under the Constitution. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Considering that it is right now the Christ insanity season, I'd like to take my comments and a question along the lines about the Catholic Church. The Vatican claims that they are an independent country, correct? Now that makes all of their clerics here in this country foreign operatives, correct?
I like your premise. I'm not an international law expert.
Well, it is absolutely true.
Yeah?
Now, they're interfering in our government and with our politicians. Why can't we throw them out of this country and back over to the Vatican? It's such a small area, they can get along with each other, I would think. So I'd like to know, why can't we do that, just out of curiosity?
I love the question. We're just trying to get them to, lose some of their IRS privileges. We'd be happy. I don't know that we can get there just yet. But I guess what I would say is that there's a serious question about the political activities, not just of the Catholic Church, let's broaden it a bit to a number of denominations where they're engaging very actively in political activity and whether their IRS status is in question. But one of the interesting things about these organizations, if you compare them to other nonprofits, 501c3 nonprofits that many of us contribute to, they have special privileges even beyond that. I'm not talking just about the allowance for the housing for the minister or whatever the case may be, but in terms of the IRS, there's actually a regulation that says that in order to do an audit of a religious entity, you have to have permission from someone at a higher level within the IRS for an audit to even go forward. And for those of you who have helped out a nonprofit and had to go through an audit, I can tell you that that is an amazing injustice, just that alone, that they are not subject to the kind of sunshine that other organizations are. And when you think about the Scientologists and what we've just been talking about with the Catholic Church and others, what would be the problem with sunshine? What would be the problem with at least equal treatment in terms of access to financial information about these organizations? So that's one of the issues that we're going to be lobbying on in Washington, D.C. I don't know.
Yes, let's stick with the Catholic Church for a moment. Do you have any sense of where a Supreme Court with 6 Catholics on it, 6 practicing Catholics on it, is going to go in regard to separation of church and state? And particularly this ludicrous notion by Scalia that the Christian cross in the Mojave Desert is not a religious symbol, right, which was first enunciated in my memory by Rehnquist anyway.
Yeah, that would be one of hundreds of absurd things that justice has said. That's one of the more recent. I will say, historically, that perhaps the best justice, or one of the best justices with regard to separation of church and state, was someone whom I had the honor to meet when I was in law school, and that was Justice William Brennan, who was a devout Catholic but an absolutist on the separation of church and state, and I wish we could dig him up and put him back in that chair. So I don't know if it's so much the religion of the people there as it is who appoints them. And sadly, the religious right had a tremendous influence on getting people like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush into positions where they could appoint these people to these incredibly powerful positions. I do want to offer one aside, by the way, about the cross issue. And this isn't the one in the Mojave Desert, but there's another case similar to that in San Diego. And I want to tell you a story about Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck grew up in La Jolla in the San Diego area. And when he was a very young man, he was a man who always believed in the rights of his fellow citizens. And he recounted this story when he was deciding whether or not to take what was then a controversial role as Atticus Finch in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird in the early 1960s. And he said what really inspired him, made him feel most strongly about taking that particular role, as opposed to the kind of typical romantic lead type or action film roles that he'd had, was he remembers as a child that they had cross burnings. You wouldn't think of this in San Diego, but they had cross burnings with the Ku Klux Klan in San Diego, and that they used that hill where that cross is now. And so that to Gregory Peck, that cross meant something very different than what you hear about. That Gregory Peck felt that the cross meant something that related to intolerance and injustice, and that it really was an inspiration for him. And I think when we talk about non-believing Americans, when we talk about Jewish Americans, many others, that when I look at that cross there in San Diego or the other one there in the Mojave Desert, that to me it's a sign of saying, as someone put it, look who's boss. We're the boss, and we're going to show you who's boss. And that's not something that Atticus Finch would believe in, and it's not something that we believe in, and we got to stand up against it.
Dearborn, Michigan has one of the highest concentrations of Muslims in the country. The University of Michigan, Dearborn, which is a public university, recently installed foot baths for Muslims to wash their feet before prayer. I'm wondering whether you're following the rise of Islam in the United States and whether you're concerned about the political influence that they may have.
Well, I'm concerned about the political influence of any religious entity where they are going to get their hands on the levers of government. I mean, I always say, and I feel very strongly about it, that we're for all parts of the First Amendment. So I am for the free expression clause. It sure as heck doesn't include what the Catholic Church says it does as far as keeping secret what their employees do. But I'm for any religious group expressing their views and values, absolutely. But I don't want their hands on the levers of power in government. I think that's where the line has to be drawn. And so I am concerned about it. One of the things I think we can do is that we're meeting more and more people who are Arab Americans and other ethnicities, who are former Muslims or come from ethnic backgrounds that are predominantly Muslim. And one thing that I'd like to see, and I've met a couple people who've expressed some interest and would be very interested because of what you just mentioned about Michigan, is to find people who are non-theistic folks who come from either they're former Muslims or come from an ethnic background that's connected to Muslim religion, and try to form some kind of former Muslim organization, a non-theistic organization, so we can have them speak out about the issues. One of the most effective, not organizations, but people I've met, groups of people I've met, are former Mormons. As I've traveled around the country, I've had quite a number of conversations with people who are formerly in the Mormon Church, and just having them testify, for lack of a better term, about their experiences is incredibly persuasive in terms of the problems that are faced by people within that church, and frankly make me very sympathetic to a lot of people, particularly women, but a lot of people who are in that church. And so to have former Muslims, I think would be a great step forward for us if we could. So if people here have ideas about connections with folks in that community, that would be tremendous, because I know specifically of someone in Ohio who fits that bill, and I'd like to get some of those folks together for a possible organization.
Thank you.
Yep.